What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at patch 2.2 for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which dropped alongside its Lord of Nothing DLC out yesterday, and that DLC, along with this patch, made some surprisingly sweeping changes to a lot of different aspects of the game that, considering we're almost 2 years out since the launch of this single-player title, is pretty surprising, and in many ways some of these changes are things I wanted to see for a long time, especially when they launched the Enhanced Edition. If you want to read the patch notes for yourself, I'll of course have them linked below, though I do want to mention that they don't actually list out a lot of the nitty-gritty changes in terms of things they've added, because some of the big highlights here are the overhauls they made to the Assassin Prestige class, new mythic feats and abilities, new spells, a new item, and many more changes and tweaks to existing classes and mechanics, both including just fixing general bugs, as well as shutting down some exploits, as it were. A decent amount to go over, so let's jump into it. Now, first up, let's talk about some of the changes they made to the Assassin Prestige class. I have gone over this previously, so to give you the most pressing information, they gave this a complete overhaul. If you're unfamiliar with this one, this class was effectively useless on basically any difficulty thanks to most of its abilities using poison, which all of the enemies in this particular adventure path are immune to. And even if you ignore that, most of how its abilities functioned also just weren't very good. So they completely changed this. For starters, we now have a mythic ability that will allow poisons and diseases to bypass immunities like we have for many other elements, though even just beyond that, they changed a lot of the abilities to make them more useful, which means the assassin went from being useless to actually having a place in the game if you want to play as one. But I mentioned new mythic feats and abilities, one of which is that new poison immunity bypass, but we do have others as well, such as Perfect Cavalry, granting you and your mount immunity to attacks of opportunity while you are mounted, or something like Spellcaster's Onslaught, which grants you bonuses to weapon attacks after you make a spell cast. And there's quite a few examples of this, but probably the most important changes here were some of the ones they made to armor and shield mythics. That is to say, making shields and armor more useful, both by giving them bonuses here, but perhaps much more importantly, closing down some of the exploits that made unarmored characters just vastly better. Again, for those who might not know, in Wrath of the Righteous, and as a result of the Pathfinder 1e system really, unarmored characters could get a much higher AC, much more easily than a heavily armored character could, which of course doesn't really make a lot of sense, and this was achieved primarily by stacking things that are not supposed to stack in the tabletop version of this, for instance. Things that are explicitly against the rules would actually function in-game. Well, they fixed a lot of this. Notoriously, the Nature's Whispers Oracle, as well as the Scaled Fist Monk, got charisma bonuses to their AC that weren't supposed to stack, and that's been fixed. Just as one example, but also great to see is that they fixed a lot of long-standing issues with some of the classes as well. For instance, those who have been watching the channel for quite some time might know that I've complained previously about the Arcanist's Eldritch Font archetype not actually working due to the implementation of its main ability not being implemented correctly, and they've since fixed that, so that should actually be a useful class to play now. And while much less impactful, they also fixed the Demon Slayer's Quarry ability, their improved fiendish versions, though the Demon Slayer was such a strong archetype for this adventure path that it didn't really matter anyway that fiendish Quarry wasn't working, but that Quarry ability now does work, which makes that class even better. So on the class and mechanic side of things, it's a very interesting mix of closing down loopholes and exploits while fixing and buffing stuff that was supposed to work. To speak a bit more broadly, I'm very surprised to see a lot of these changes, as many of them have again been long-standing issues since launch that I just frankly wasn't expecting to be addressed at this point. So seeing them having taken the time to actually fix and change these things even years since launch is certainly very welcome if unexpected. But that's actually not all they've done yet either, because they've also added new spells to the game, and while I don't have a full list, the patch notes for some reason did not include all of them, they did add in spells like Implosion and Meteor Swarm to the game, and while I did look through for a few of them, most of what I've seen new spell-wise is very late-game, high-level spells, mostly level 9 stuff that I found. But again, without a complete list of what was added, it's hard to say for sure. But in any event, more spells means more ways to play the game, more things to do, different approaches to combat, and while that isn't fundamentally going to change the game in comparison to some of the class changes, it's still nice to see. They also added a new item to the game called the Pearl of Power, which allows you to once per day recall any spell that you've already cast, effectively allowing you to cast more of your higher level spells that you wouldn't normally be able to. And then the rest of the patch is a large quantity of fixes to things like items, bugs, UI stuff, etc. And this is where we see small changes but still meaningful ones, such as the blood kineticist's animations finally being fixed or altered to be what you would expect, that is to say, blood, as opposed to just using the standard water blast animations. Or when a kitsune changes form, they now have an animation for that, etc. So this patch, along with the DLC and the 15 archetypes it added to the game, which themselves also required some alterations. For instance, they added some new domains to the game in order to accommodate the new cleric archetype separatist, just to give an example. So to summarize and sort of wrap this up from a highlight perspective, I'm kind of shocked about how big this patch was alongside the DLC itself. In many ways, I would say a lot of this is what I wanted from the Enhanced Edition, which also brought a lot of great changes, but this patch in particular addressed a lot of long-standing issues that people have been providing feedback for since the game launched, and it will likely have a very significant impact on any future playthroughs or people picking up the game for the first time might see or encounter. That said though, after this patch and this DLC, there is one more DLC to come, which will more than likely be the last one. It's not set in stone, but it is very probably going to be the final one, which is meant to be a sort of Mass Effect Citadel style DLC, so the stakes will be a little bit lower there, as that seems like the appropriate place to send this game off on, at least in terms of big content updates. But to wrap this video up, this is a great patch and a great set of changes alongside the DLC that you're going to benefit from even if you don't own that, which I'm definitely very happy to see for myself, as they finally address many of the things I personally have brought up on the channel multiple times in the past, which means my only real complaint here is that a lot of this didn't happen sooner. But better late than never, as they say, though that is going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.